Peptide therapy has exploded over the last few years. From gym lockers to telemedicine clinics, everybody's talking about these compounds. Every few months, a new peptide promises faster recovery, easier gains, and better results. The challenge isn't finding peptides anymore. It's cutting through the noise to know what actually is backed by research versus what's just marketing hype. And today, I'm breaking down the 4 most talked about underground muscle building peptides. For each one, I'll show you what people are saying about it, what the biology actually is, what the research shows, the good and the bad, and what the real risks are. Then I'll show you some medically supervised options. All right, let's see what the data actually says. If you're new to my channel, hi, I'm Dr. Jones, DC, and I lead the coaching department at our nationwide peptide and GLP-1 telemedicine clinic, where I coach thousands of patients on peptides and GLP-1s. And this passion of mine comes from my own 20-year battle with obesity and metabolic dysfunction. And now I work alongside my medical practitioners, helping people navigate through this safely, because optimizing your routine, not just taking a bunch of medications and peptides, is the answer for long-term health optimization. All right, let's start with the #1 most talked about, MK677, the oral peptide that's everywhere right now. And I get why. The Reddit threads, the YouTube videos, the TikTok posts, they all make a very compelling case. No injections, just swallow a pill once a day. Better sleep, enhanced recovery, muscle growth while you sleep. One of the most cited studies shows that it significantly increased lean body mass in elderly subjects. That's actually from a clinical therapeutic study, and this is the one that gets referenced constantly in peptide communities. The convenience factor alone is massive. No mixing vials, no needles, no injection site management. 24-hour half-life means you only gotta pop 1 pill a day. Pretty damn easy, right? For most people intimidated by injectable peptides, this seems like a perfect entry point. Interest score in this one, 5 out of 5. This is the most talked about muscle building peptide right now, and it's not even close. So what's actually happening biologically speaking? And let's be accurate. MK677 isn't technically a peptide, it's a peptidomimetic, a small molecule drug that actually acts like a peptide. See, it gets marketed with peptides, but the chemistry is a little different. It's a pill that activates the ghrelin receptors, and it sends signals to pituitary gland to release growth hormone, which then triggers IGF, insulin-like growth factor. And this is the main reason why growth hormone builds muscle, because growth hormone releases IGF. IGF really is the potent muscle grower here. 24-hour half-life means, again, a single pill makes maintaining stable muscle growth very easy with this one. So what does the data actually reveal? Phase 2 human trials, which is real clinical research, not animal studies by the way, found that elderly subjects gained about 1.1 kilo of lean body mass over 12 months. That's about 2.4 pounds. Modest, but real. Sleep quality improved, REM sleep increased. These are legitimate benefits. Bodybuilders report 5 to 10 pounds of lean mass over 3 to 6 months, though that's anecdotal, not clinical data. And those reports are typically from guys who are already taking testosterone replacement and, many other things for that matter. Training 5 days a week, consuming 200 plus grams of protein. The average person starting from metabolic dysfunction won't see those kind of results. But here's the critical finding that doesn't get discussed. HOMA-IR increased about 15 to 20%. That's a measure of insulin resistance. Subjects' bodies become measurably worse at handling glucose. That's blood sugar. Now here's why this matters differently for different people. The bodybuilders getting great results on MK677, they're already very metabolically healthy. They're on testosterone replacement therapy. Their insulin sensitivity is dialed in. They can tolerate that 15 to 20% hit to insulin signaling because their baseline is already so good. But if you're the average Joe trying to build muscle mass, looking for some help, someone who's already carrying some extra weight, especially around the midsection, already has some insulin resistance likely, you're already metabolically compromised. MK677 doesn't just give you a modest side effect, it compounds your existing insulin resistance problem. You're making your metabolic dysfunction worse, which makes fat loss harder, and it makes everything you're trying to accomplish much more difficult. This is why MK677 never got the FDA approval despite completing phase 2 trials. The benefit to risk ratio failed. So what does it mean? What actually happens when you make insulin resistance worse for someone who's already struggling metabolically speaking? Your cells become less responsive to insulin. Your body compensates by producing more insulin. That elevated insulin promotes fat storage, and it makes weight loss nearly impossible, and increased hunger through leptin resistance. Now, leptin is another entirely powerful hormone that is different from insulin and plays massive roles in regulating weight management. For the most part, leptin pretty much follows suit with insulin, which is why it's something that we don't have to talk about as often, But it's important to note, the World Anti-Doping Agency actually classifies MK677 as a banned growth hormone secretagogue. Multiple sports authorities prohibit its use in competitive athletics due to documented metabolic side effects. The increased appetite that comes from ghrelin receptor activation can lead to uncontrolled calorie intake, which is manageable for disciplined bodybuilders, but devastating for somebody who's already struggling with food control and chatter. And for women especially, disrupting insulin sensitivity can have a cascading effect on hormonal balance, menstrual cycles, and PCOS-like symptoms. So here's the bottom line. For people who seem to be okay on MK677, it's likely that they have metabolic foundations that can absorb the hit. But if that's not you, you're compounding an existing problem while chasing muscle gains. The data shows that it works, but it also shows why the FDA said no. And that's a trade-off that you're making there, and I wouldn't bother with it, especially when we got better options for you coming up here in a bit. By the way, if this insulin resistance issue is making you think about your own metabolic health, we offer free discovery calls where you can learn what it's like to work with me, my team of coaches, my medical team, and how we can help you long-term with utilizing peptides and optimizing your health. You can use that link in the description to book that call, or you can just text the number on the screen. But first, here's the peptide that represents the underground stacking culture. GHRP2, or growth hormone releasing peptide 2. If you spent any time in the peptide forums, you've seen this one paired with CJC-1295 constantly. It's called the classic stack. And the appeal, cleaner growth hormone release than GHRP6, without the extreme hunger. Less activation of your ghrelin means you get the same growth hormone pulse without feeling like you need to raid the fridge every couple hours. Professional muscle building forums call it more efficacious than GHRP6, with only slight cortisol and prolactin increases at that saturation point, meaning at the right doses they recommend. Those hormones can be bad when elevated past certain points, but slight elevations, probably negligible, and the DIY community loves it because you can stack it with other peptides like CJC-1295 and create your own synergistic protocol. Interest score on this one, 4 out of 5. Steady presence in the underground peptide world. Okay, so what's the mechanism here? GHRP2 is a hexapeptide, 6 amino acids linked together. It acts as a ghrelin receptor agonist, but it also suppresses somatostatin. That's a hormone that tells your pituitary gland to stop releasing growth hormones. So you're hitting two pathways here. You're stimulating growth hormone release while blocking the brake pedal. And that creates a pulse of growth hormone from your pituitary, which then leads to much higher levels of IGF production. Sounds great, right? Underground dosing protocols typically call for 100 to 300 micrograms in a subcutaneous injection, 1 to 3 times per day on an empty stomach. You heard that right, 1 to 3 times per day. Probably lost you there. What does the clinical data demonstrate? Small human studies show that GHRP2 increases growth hormones significantly in the short term, but that's transient. It drops back down. And patients that I've seen that were using this typically report inconsistent results. Body composition data is very limited, with one trial showing lean muscle preservation in elderly subjects. Users report are inconsistent as well, improved recovery, better sleep, gradual recomposition over 8 to 12 weeks, but the context matters here. The people getting good results are often already very metabolically healthy. The theme here that you might be noticing, they're on testosterone replacement therapy, they're eating 200 grams of protein a day, training 5 days a week, their cortisol is managed, their sleep is dialed in. When someone who's metabolically compromised, high stress, poor sleep, existing hormonal imbalances, tries the same protocol, the modest cortisol and prolactin elevation from the GHRP2 can tip them into worse dysfunction. The side effects outweigh the modest benefits because there's no foundation to buffer it. Here's what the data and user experience reveals. You're injecting 1 to 3 times per day. That's not once a week protocol, that's a daily commitment multiple times. From a research chemical source with no pharmaceutical quality control, water retention is common. That modest cortisol and prolactin elevation, which in sensitive individuals can mean devastating side effects like gynecomastia development, which is breast tissue development in men, libido effects in both sexes. And here's the bigger issue. Underground users, they don't just use GHRP2 alone. They end up ultimately having to stack it with other growth hormone analogs to get the optimal results. There are 0 human studies on these combinations. You're creating your own drug cocktail based on forum posts and the research conflicts on whether receptors actually downregulate over time. Meaning we don't know if the exposure over long periods creates a decreased response, but I'm sure it does because we see this in human physiology across the board with multiple hormones and medication. This is an underground DIY stacking approach. People creating their own protocols, injecting multiple times daily, combining compounds with no interaction data, buying from research chemical vendors. Even if GHRP2 itself works modestly, you're operating completely outside of any medical oversight here. If the idea of injecting yourself yourself 1 to 3 times per day sounds like a nightmare, especially dealing with underground research chemical vendors. And honestly, it should. Hit that subscribe button right now because we put out multiple videos per week breaking down what's actually working in the muscle building and metabolic health space and what's actually not, looking at the data, parsing out the bullshit. And it also helps out the channel a lot. So go ahead and hit that button now. Now, here's what's happening when you try to override your body's regulatory systems. Hexarelin, baby, the big one that gets called the most potent GHRP on every form where it comes up. And the initial report backs that up. Massive growth hormone spikes, insane pumps in the gym, rapid strength gains in the first 2 weeks. Users describe it as the most powerful growth hormone releasing agent available. Sounds pretty badass, right? Let me get finished with this section first. There's also some interesting research on cardiac benefits. Animal studies showed improved heart function after ischemic events, aka blood flow issues, that give it an appeal beyond just muscle building. The interest score on this one, though, is only 2 out of 5, and there's a reason why. So what's actually occurring in your body? Hexarelin is another hexapeptide, 6 amino acids, but it's the most potent ghrelin receptor agonist in its class. Like we said, it creates a growth hormone pulse that's 3 to 5 times higher than the earlier mentioned GHRP6. Initially at least, but it also binds to a unique cardiac receptor that's distinct from the pituitary receptor, the pituitary gland in your brain. That's where growth hormone is released to begin with. That's where the cardioprotective signaling comes from. It's some effects on the calcium channels in the heart. Now, underground dosing typically is 100 to 200 micrograms, subcutaneous 2 to 3 times a day. And they're one of those massive big commitment type peptides. The clinical trials confirm maximal growth hormone release, but on the short term, IGF levels can increase 30 to 40% in a couple weeks. That's massive. The cardiac research is interesting. Animal models showed reduced heart dysfunction, but that never really translated into the human data. So the clinical relevance here remains unclear. But here's the problem. By week 3 to 4, the effects stop dramatically. Users report insane pumps for the first couple weeks, and then finito, nada. That's not user error. That's straight up receptor down regulation. Your receptors adapt and stop responding. To restore sensitivity, you'll need to cycle off for 4 to 8 weeks, and then you get 3 weeks on, 6 weeks off. That's not a sustainable muscle building protocol, so now we're back to stacking with other agents, and it's just a freaking nightmare. Beyond desensitization issues, higher cortisol and higher prolactin elevation among all other GHRPs. Water retention through the roof, the cardiac benefit that makes it interesting never really made it past animal research, and nothing in the human therapeutics was ever established. This is the perfect example of why the most potent doesn't mean the most effective. Your body has mechanisms that will shut this down within a month, if not sooner. You can't out-hack your biology no matter how much you try. At least the scientists are working on solutions for that, but quick question. Before we continue on, if you want me to make a video where I discuss natural ways to boost your growth hormone levels, let me know in the comments. Tell me all your specific goals and what do you think growth hormone release would be the right option for you. That way I know what to focus on. Now here's the peptide with the worst contamination rate of all. Follistatin 344. This is where marketing gets aggressive. Myostatin blocking that doubles muscle mass. I remember growing up seeing the dog, the ox, the cow with massive muscle building on their body. I mean, it was insane. I was like, holy crap, natural muscle builder without hormones. That's what they say. By blocking myostatin's ability to bind to certain receptors, follistatin 344 can allow for massive increases in muscle growth. This gets positioned as the legal natural alternative, although, that's a whole other area. Interest score of this is still only 2 out of 5, but it's rising slowly as the research continues. But the price, $300 to $800 per cycle. The mechanism in theory, myostatin is a protein that tells your muscles to stop growing. It's your body's natural brake system on muscle development. Follistatin binds to myostatin and activin, blocking them from their ability to bind to the receptor. That's inhibiting the signaling pathway that normally puts the brakes on muscle growth. The theory is remove the brake and you get unlimited muscle growth without even trying to work out. This is like cutting the brake lines on your car. Sounds great if your goal is to go really fast, but then you remember why brakes exist to begin with. Myostatin just doesn't limit muscle growth. It also suppresses tumor formation. So removing the brake system has implications beyond muscle building. Kind of scary stuff there. What does the research actually show? Follistatin showed 10% lean mass increases in primates over 15 months. Not doubling, 10%. That wasn't that much. And that was gene therapy, literally rewriting the DNA to produce more follistatin continuously. Mice with genetic overexpression of follistatin did show double the muscle mass growth. But again, genetic modifications, not an injectable peptide. The human data, there's none. There are no human studies on injectable follistatin for muscle building. Here's the devastating part. Research testing on the black market follistatin products found that fewer than half of the tested samples actually contained the claimed compound. Many products contained completely different peptides, like GHRP2 and other growth hormone peptides. The contamination and mislabeling rate in underground peptides is significant enough that you're essentially gambling on what you're actually getting. And even if you do get real follistatin, the injectable form has never been shown to work like any sort of gene therapy. It's bad enough that if you're playing in the black market, but to play around with something that messes with your genes, there might be no going back from that. The cancer concerns are very real. The relationship between myostatin inhibition and cancer is very complex and far from understood. Some research suggests that follistatin may have protective effects in certain cancers, while theoretical concerns exist about removing growth regulation. This remains an area of active investigation, and I'm excited to see what happens over the next decade or two. We have fibrosis concerns. Follistatin also binds to certain proteins, which theoretically could affect bone density, though clinical significance of this interaction for peptide users remains very unclear. The WADA has it banned under S4 myostatin inhibitors. Tagged variants show up in sports drug testing, and it's very expensive. Underground vendors typically charge $300 to $800 per cycle. Given the significant contamination and mislabeling issues documented in the research, you're gambling on whether you're getting the claimed compound at all. I would stay the hell away from this, and I wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole. This is the ultimate example of gene therapy marketing being used to sell injectable peptides. They're not the same thing. A patient that we'll call Sarah, 42-year-old mother, lost 35 pounds on GLP-1s, but felt soft and flabby. She was doing endless cardio, eating only 60 to 70 grams of protein, thinking, I'll rebuild muscle later. Then she started seeing TikTok videos about follistatin doubling muscle growth, gene therapy that's proven, people showing before and afters, claiming incredible results. She spent 2 weeks researching, found vendors, almost ordered $600 worth. Instead, she called our clinic first. Our doctors had a conversation with her and explained that gene therapy data is very different, not injectable peptides, and you don't need to experiment. You need to lift heavy weights, eat 150 grams of protein, and other key peptides that I'll show you guys later can make all the difference. 6 months later, she gained 8 pounds of muscle, lost another 10 pounds of fat, and she told us, I almost wasted $600 on some junk stuff on TikTok. I don't know what the hell I was thinking. She got a little desperate there. If you've already bought any of these underground peptides, but you're realizing now how complex this gets, or you're trying to figure out the dosing or quality and what to do on your own, you don't have to navigate through this journey by yourself. You can book a free discovery call, speak to one of my experts, and learn what it's like to work with me, my coaches, my medical team, and how we can build the right foundation for you for long-term results. You can click that link in the description or text the number on the screen. Okay, so we've seen what the research actually shows on these underground peptides. Some promising mechanisms, but significant issues with quality control, sustainability, metabolic side effects, and contamination. Now, here's the foundation that 80% of people skip. Before you spend $400 a month on peptides, check your testosterone. I don't care if you're male or female, if you're not optimized here, everything else is wasted money. Men in our clinic typically aim from closer to 900-ish total testosterone when optimizing for muscle building and performance and overall health and longevity. The standard normal reference range is garbage, and if your doctor says, hey, you're at 350, you're fine, they're technically correct for basic health, but in our clinical experience, basic health and optimal health are completely different. Women, we generally use symptomatic relief more so than labs to optimize their health. Of course, individual response based off goals also is going to vary. Most TRT clinics get this completely wrong because they're chasing levels rather than chasing symptomatic relief. And when you optimize your health, you don't need as high of a level of hormones to feel like a badass again. You can actually use less hormones to feel really good on TRT therapy when you're optimizing your health. And that's why the combination of both is so important. And yes, women need testosterone too. It's critical for muscle building, libido, energy, mental clarity. So why does this matter? Because testosterone is the potent base anabolic hormone in your body. Peptides optimize what you already have. They amplify your body's signal. But if your baseline testosterone is low, there's nothing to amplify. You're trying to build a house with a cracked foundation. But here's what most people don't realize about testosterone optimization. The muscle building benefits is just one piece. Low testosterone in both men and women show up as brain fog, crushing fatigue by mid-afternoon, lack of motivation, possible increased anxiety and depression, inability to focus. You just don't feel like that youthful vigor that you had before. You think you need more coffee, more willpower, maybe an antidepressant, but often you just need testosterone in your body at an amount that you had when you were younger. And in our clinic, I've seen patients who've been on anxiety and depression medications for years, and once we work with their prescribing physicians to optimize their testosterone levels, many report significant improvement that allow them, under medical supervision, to reduce and in many cases eliminate those medications entirely. Their energy comes back, their fog lifts, the motivation returns. Women especially notice this, not just in muscle building, but in daily function. That relentless need for caffeine, that zero drive, that mental mud. Testosterone optimization addresses all of it. Testosterone is protective for brain health too as well. There's research suggesting that it might even help prevent the development of neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's. Pretty awesome stuff. It's not just about looking better, it's about functioning better in every aspect of your life. Testosterone replacement therapy done right means physician-supervised baseline hormone optimization, regular lab monitoring, and also looking at metabolic health too as well. For men, it's usually injectable or topical creams, and for women, it's usually cream or troches. Those are the things that you put in between your cheek and your gums. Dosing gets adjusted based on your symptoms and labs, not just based on some freaking forum posts. Fixing this creates the foundation for everything else: fat loss, muscle building, recovery, mental performance, emotional stability. Fix this first, your hormone foundation, or you're flushing money down the drain chasing crazy peptide stacks. Now, if you want me to make a video where I dive into combining hormone therapy like testosterone, thyroid management with your GLP-1 meds, let me know in the comments and tell me what sort of hormonal issue are you currently struggling with so I know what to focus on in this video. Is it low testosterone? Is it thyroid? Is it insulin resistant? Drop that comment below. Now, before we get into the peptides, here are two things that matter even more. And before peptides, are you even training properly? Because I see people spending $500 a month on peptides while going to the gym 2 days a week doing random exercises. Here's what builds muscle: resistance training 3 to 4 times per week, minimum. Progressive overload. That means you must increase your weight or volume over time. That's the mechanical stimulus for muscle growth. Compound movements like squats, deadlifts, bench press, rows, overhead presses. Rep ranges between 8 to 12 reps for maximal hypertrophy. Here's the key principles. Peptides amplify recovery and growth hormone signaling. They don't replace the training stimulus. No training stimulus equals no muscle growth, even with peptides. And women, you need to train just as hard as men do. The idea that lightweight tone is complete nonsense. Heavy progressive overload builds your muscle. Your testosterone is lower so you don't get bulky. You'll just finally build the muscle mass that you want. The pattern is common in our patient. In our clinic, one patient we'll call Jennifer hated the idea of lifting weights. She thought that she'd get bulky, only doing cardio, eating 60 to 70 grams of protein. After we convinced her to try progressive overload training, starting with just bodyweight movements, she fell in love with lifting. Now she's stronger than ever before, and she looks leaner than she did when she weighed 10 pounds less. Now, are you eating enough protein? Because most people aren't. I see patients spending $500 a month on peptide stacks, and they're eating freaking 60 grams of protein. You're literally wasting your money. The target is simple: 1 gram of protein per pound of target body weight. Goal is to weigh 150 pounds. You need to be eating about 150 grams of protein per day. Spread it across 3 to 4 meals. Really, every meal you eat should contain protein because your body has leucine threshold for muscle protein synthesis. You need adequate protein per meal to actually trigger muscle building. Under-eating protein, thinking that it'll make you bulky, you gotta throw that out the door. Without adequate protein, you can't build muscle even if everything else is perfect. Jessica, 43, lost 35 pounds, but her DEXA scan showed that she lost 15 pounds of muscle. That's 750 calories per day of metabolism gone. We got her down to 150 grams of protein, resistance training 3 times per week. 6 months later, she gained 8 pounds of muscle. She lost 10 pounds of fat. The scale barely moved, but her body completely transformed. And in our clinic, I've seen patients spend $6,000 a year on peptides while eating 1 chicken breast a day. Your body can't build muscle from growth hormone signaling alone. It needs the amino acids, the building blocks of protein. Optimize this first. It's so easy. Now let's talk about what actually works under medical supervision: CJC-1295 plus Ipamorelin. These compounds are now available via 503A compounding pharmacies with a physician's prescription. What this means: same compounds, the underground uses, but pharmaceutical grade with physician oversight. The mechanism here: CJC-1295 is a growth hormone releasing hormone analog. It sustains growth hormone elevation. Ipamorelin is a ghrelin mimetic. It creates a pulsatile release, mimicking your body's natural rhythm. You combine them together, you get a sustained, prolonged, physiological pulse. This is powerful. It triggers the IGF that you need for muscle building. Growth hormone and IGF-1 increases 2 to 3 times baseline. Anecdotal reports, and these are consistent across our clinic: 5 to 10 pounds of lean mass over 8 to 12 weeks when the foundation is right. Compare that to GHRP2, similar mechanism, but you can't get that from a 503A high-quality pharmacy, which means dosing accuracy issues, sterility issues. Another safe option is Tesamorelin, but for the same price, CJC-IPA gets you much better results, and that's something that most people have no idea about. Quick question for you: underground research chemicals for cheaper prices and faster access, or doctor-supervised pharmaceutical grade for safety and oversight? Which approach are you taking? Look, I respect people taking their health into their own hands. That's what biohacking is all about. I just want to hear your perspective and what you guys are doing out there. Drop it in the comments because I read every single one. Now, the most powerful, safe muscle building peptide, hands down, Tesamorelin. Tesamorelin, brand name Agrifta, was actually FDA approved in 2010 for HIV patients suffering with lipodystrophy, which essentially means they had extra visceral fat. Now, off-label, people use it for recomposition, visceral fat reduction, belly fat reduction. This is what safe, legitimate peptide therapy looks like. This is the king, without a doubt. Multiple phase 3 randomized controlled trials, that's the gold standard research. Outcomes show 15 to 20% reduction in visceral fat, equating over 6 months. Great muscle growth, again with a foundation to support that. Improved muscle density. This one works as a growth hormone releasing hormone, creating pulsatile growth hormone releases that match your natural rhythm. The FDA approval means that this peptide is safe as safe can be, under medical supervision. Here's the bottom line. Underground peptides come with contamination risks, metabolic side effects that compound existing problems, and no oversight. The safer alternatives, 503A compounds or FDA approved, give you the same mechanisms with quality control and medical monitoring. But remember, testosterone optimization has a baseline, progressive overload training, adequate protein intake. That's the foundation. Peptides amplify a solid foundation. They don't create one. If the risks that we're discussing here about underground peptides concern you and you want to learn what it's like to work with me, my coaches, my medical team to build the right foundation for you, set you up for long-term success, whether your goal is fat loss, whether your goal is weight maintenance, or you want to get jacked, whatever it is, click that link in the description to book yourself a free discovery call with one of my experts. They're going to take the time to get to know you and figure out what it looks like, make a recommendation for you. You can also text that number on the screen too as well. Now, if you guys want to know what proper eating looks like, check out this video right here where I break down the 20 groceries that you should absolutely have in your kitchen right now, whatever your goal is. We'll see you guys later.